Yeah, also, the animation of Parasite is horrifying.
Oh, yeah.
There's the moment that really got me was, later Parasite, extends its own mouth, digs its hands into its mouth and just extends it on its own. I was just like, oh no, this is Guillermo del Toro is somewhere having a field day watching this.
Mm-hmm. Well, I saw someone compare it to a Studio Ghibli kind of thing. And I'm like, it's Studio Ghibli body horror. To our 100th episode, 3-part spectacular of the Men of Steel podcast.
My God.
I'm Case Aiken, and as always, I am joined by my co-host, Jmike Falson.
Dude, I can't believe we made it this far.
I can't believe it either. We have crossed that threshold. This was supposed to be episode 100 right now, but our 99th episode ended up being 2 episodes.
How that happened? It just happened.
We know how it happens. It's because we have wonderful, eloquent people who like to talk about Superman material. And we have more wonderful, eloquent people to talk about Superman material today, because we are talking about All-Star Superman, the animated movie. And for that conversation, we are joined once again by Duke.
Hey, everybody.
And by JD Martin.
I'm back. Talking McDuffie and Morrison.
Yeah. No, people are definitely curious. Like, wait, you're talking about Morrison and you don't have JD? Yes. Because here we are.
According to Case, the Morrison expert is back.
Again, you did a whole season of your comic show on Morrison. I feel like you've earned it.
Thank you. Dallas Taylor from Commerce Collective might have words with you, but I already told him this, and I don't remember his reaction, but I'll just say he approves.
A Morrison expert? I mean, there are lots of Morrison experts.
There are a lot of us out there. I honestly, I believe Alan is one of us as well.
Also, June wrote multiple papers about Grant Morrison.
Yeah. So there's a guild. We are the guild of Morrison experts. The GME.
So we're still talking about All-Star Superman. Specifically, we wanted to talk about the animated movie, but also this is our chance to talk with the two of you about the story in general and all of that. So my question to the table is, what was your experience of All-Star Superman as a story? Did you read the comic first? Did you read it as it was coming out? Did you see the movie first? I know Mike's answer, so this is for JD and for Duke.
You made me know my answer. What do you mean?
Well, by I know your answer, I mean you told it on the last episode. So
I mean, I could have said more stuff. But I get your point.
Hey, you can't rewrite history between episodes.
Mike, just because Alan isn't here doesn't mean we can't shame you.
I know.
It's not shame. You just watch the movie first.
No,
it's called a shame, Case.
There's no shame. All right, Duke.
Learn it and let it consume you.
Duke, what was your experience with All-Star Superman? Did you read it first? Did you watch the movie first? How did you come to this property?
I definitely read it first. When did I read it? It was 2008. Because by that point, there was a comic book store open near my college, so I was allowed to throw as much money as I can to collecting as many trades as possible. And so I got All-Star Superman on a whim because I kept hearing great things about it at that point. Like, okay, this is the most regarded Superman story of all time. It's the most beloved Superman story of all time. I'm like, all right, yeah, I'll get behind this. And I start reading it. I'm like, oh, wait a minute, where are the Kents? And so it took a while for me to acclimate to the fact that this is the earlier Superman, the kind of Bronze Age, Silver Age kind of guy before the post-crisis kind of hit and, retroactively changed it all. But yeah, I definitely read the book first and fell in love with it more on every successive reread because there's so much you can pull from it.
Yeah, totally. I feel like you're kind of in the same bracket for me where approaching Superman as a comic property, coming in post-crisis and really sort of experiencing all of that, and having that very particular reality that we were in, as opposed to the much more choose your own adventure style of Silver Age Superman.
Yeah.
So when did you actually end up watching the movie?
Definitely when the movie came out, because there was so much behind it, especially with Dwayne McDuffie's passing and it's being one of his last credited works. And I was just kind of really excited to see it because, it's one of the most interesting dissections of Superman, and I wanted to see how that kind of translate to animated form. And for the most part, I think it did a pretty good job, even if I have like a lot of gripes about it, which we'll probably get into later, but you know.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I mean, like the problem of this movie is that it is a 76-minute adaptation of a 12-issue comic. It's hard to cram that much in. JD, how about you? What was your experience coming into the story, and then what was your experience? Well, go on.
I actually did have to look this up to see when I acquired my copy of the comic, because I read the comic first, although I knew of the movie before that, because I feel like a lot of people of my generation, like I grew up watching the direct to DVD DC animated movies, starting with Superman Doomsday. So I was like paying attention to the movies that were coming out in that pipeline, and this was one of them. So I knew of the story, but the first time I actually experienced it and experienced it for what it was reading the comic back in August of 2019 when I acquired my copy of the trade. And I actually didn't watch the movie until I believe it was like early 2021. Just kind of like, I was like saying like kind of like a fuck it, like just yeah, like let's watch it. And because reading the comic, this was around the time I was getting more and more into Grant Morrison's work, and reading that solidified my love. I think around this time I had just finished reading Doom Patrol, and there were a couple others in there that I had been reading, but this comic was the story that really sort of like, okay, Morrison is onto something here as far as what my taste in comics are, what my taste in the types of superhero stories I want to read are, and also to kind of just get into a molecular level, like the type of Superman stories I want to read. And then the movie came along in my life, and Dwayne McDuffie is the shit. There's no getting around that. I love that man to death, and yeah, I love the comic. It's maybe my favorite comic of all time, and I love the movie for what it is.
Yeah, I think that's all fair on this one. I mean, looking again, we're looking here at then what is supposed to be a slightly more mass market abridged story of this big epic Superman 12-part saga.
Well, it's the same thing that happened that McDuffie did with another Morrison story, which we talked about on this podcast with Crisis on Two Earths, adapting JLA Earth 2. It's taking this. I mean, granted, the two comics are very, very different in that Earth 2 is like, that comic is extremely dense and is really meant for is not meant for new comics readers. It is extremely like daunting work to get through, whereas this comic was actually is really meant for anybody. Anybody can pick this up and understand who Superman is really like within the first 3 pages. But the way McDuffie adapting Morrison is so interesting in that he was taking these Morrison stories and, like you said, streamlining them for mass market audiences, but the way he was adapting them with, like when he adapting Earth 2 into Crisis on Two Earths was just to make it like make it the good and evil world, and good will triumph over evil in the end, because that's what the Justice League does. The Justice League will succeed. And then here it's, well, no, we're not going to change what Morrison was going for. We're just going to simplify. And both ways work.
I think it's 2 different problems is the situation, because like Earth 2 is very dense, as you said, but there's actually not that much story.
No,
like
Earth 2 is a very straightforward 3-act story.
It
right,
is.
but with lots of stuff going on in every panel.
It's built to be a comic, because it is a commentary, as we discussed over on Comics Quest when we talked about the comic. Like it is commenting on the nature of storytelling with superheroes in comics. Whereas also Superman is just everything that Morrison loves about Superman synthesized into 12 issues. 12 dense issues, because you did have like 2-hour episodes on that comic.
Yeah, it's Morrison. Every panel, it's a Morrison quietly joint. So everything has a lot going on.
It's so dense. Every frame is so dense.
Yes, exactly.
There's a reason why I haven't done a Flex Mentallo episode yet.
But the difference there, though, is that McDuffie's challenge with adapting Earth 2 and why it's not really considered like a straightforward adaptation. It's, there's clearly elements being drawn from it, but it's its own story, is that he had to build it out. He had to make it into a full story that sort of worked with all the ideas that they wanted to play and make it fit this the runtime of like 70-ish minutes, whatever it was, where, because again, like, the actual events are pretty quick. If you're showing it on screen, like you'll burn through all that time really fast, and you don't have moments to stop and like zoom in on this dense Frank Quitely artwork.
It would have been like a Justice League 2-parter for the show.
Right. Meanwhile, here, in addition to the density of all the Frank Quitely stuff that's going on, the amazing like panel layouts and interesting stuff in terms of how you're positioning everything and the crazy character designs and all of the Grant Morrison ideas and capital I ideas that are going on here, you're just not going to get that in 70 minutes.
No, this easily could, Alan on the comics episode did mention how this should have at least been a 2-part movie. I argue that the only, if you really want to adapt this the way it should be adapted, this would have to be a 10-episode series or a 15-episode series. Yes. It is because there is just so much going on in the comic.
Yeah, the way it's paced out, it's more episodic because it's because trying to frame a 3-act story with Grant Morrison's All-Star, it's kind of difficult because it's the traditional writing idiom is okay, in your first act you have to set up the main conflict, the stakes, and what the character's journey is, and it's I guess we gotta get to the trials quicker in Act 1. That way, Acts 2 and 3 could be paying off the building up the trials and setting them up and paying them off. But in a movie sense, you also have to kind of consider does this work for a cinematic, language? Because we don't see the infinite universe at all, and because there's no way you can play off that one because that's just Grant Morrison's continuity playing off itself, and in the traditional Mobius strip.
Yeah, I mean it's impressive how much they were able to squeeze into this 70-minute runtime, but. You do lose some stuff. You lose Jimmy Olsen becoming the head of Project and becoming Doomsday to stop a black kryptonite poison.
That
Superman.
Honestly, I will say if I had to change anything about this movie, it would be that. I would bring that back.
Yeah, same.
Yeah, this movie doesn't spend as much time with Jimmy Olsen, and that's kind of a bummer.
Yeah, especially when you have an actor like Matthew Gray Gubler,
yes.
Which I feel that's a great segue into. Let's talk about the cast for this movie. I love talking about cast because I'm fascinated by the alchemy of casting.
Sure, we've got some fucking winners in this.
Oh
yeah,
all. We've got Ed Asner as fucking Perry White.
Yep.
Yes, honestly, Ed Asner, best Perry White. This is best Perry White.
I keep forgetting
I'm inclined to believe.
I keep forgetting he hasn't voiced Perry White, but he voiced J. Jonah Jameson in Spider-Man. Was it Spider-Man TAS that he voiced Perry White? I'm sorry, J. Jonah Jameson.
That honestly makes
very
sense.
well might have been. I'm double checking.
Yeah,
I mean the thing is, Ed Asner just voicing crotchety men is one of my I mean the ultimate is of course Carl in Up. And he's absolutely incredible in that movie. So yeah, Ed Asner is the very small amount he gets in here, but him just ripping Luthor apart is so good. It's so sweet.
Yeah, Duke, to confirm, it was the 90s Spider-Man, the animated
there
series.
you go. He's good at newspapermen.
I need to rewatch that show because I loved it as a kid. My favorite were the Daredevil episodes when Daredevil shows up and Matt Murdock has to represent Peter Parker in court. God, I love that show.
Oh yeah, I rewatched it recently. I'm like, wow, this still holds up.
Yeah, it made me like The Spot, for fuck's sake.
Yeah.
God, I'm so excited for the Spot to be in Across the Spider-Verse and Jason Schwartzman as the Spot. Ugh. I sat there and I was like, Patrick Williams is so happy right now.
But moving on to other characters, because Ed Asner, despite the fact that, yes, perfect Perry White. Oh my God, how is he not just like everyone, before?
He was born to say Great Caesar's Ghost.
Right, exactly.
Yeah, also, like, Ed Asner would be a great live action Perry White as well.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just saying, Warner Brothers, get your act together, give us that Batgirl movie we were supposed to have, and also cast Ed Asner as Perry White.
Retroactively?
Yeah.
Time machine.
Yeah,
Like with deepfakes?
No, just new continuity.
What if every time someone wanted to make a movie, and instead of doing like the Carrie Fisher kind of like zombie thing, they're like, oh, this is the perfect casting, and then they just show the grave.
Didn't they do that with Jimmy
Plain
Olsen?
text. Yeah, that's dark. Okay.
Yeah.
Moving on.
Yeah.
Anthony LaPaglia as Lex Luthor is fucking great.
He,
Oh,
like,
yeah.
he steals the movie.
Yeah.
It
I don't know.
is. Look, obviously Clancy Brown is my
Yeah.
go-to Lex Luthor,
Yes.
my favorite Lex Luthor of all time. But this is a pretty good Lex Luthor.
Yeah. Actually, so so for the listeners at home, I own this movie on Blu-ray, and the Blu-ray comes with a beautiful thing that is a Bruce Timm Grant Morrison commentary track, and on that track, Bruce Timm did mention, like Morrison mentions like how much they love the animated series that Bruce Timm produced in the 90s, which is honestly, I would say, like, outside of All-Star Superman, the best Superman thing of all time. And Bruce Timm mentions them of like throwing around the idea of bringing back those actors, bringing back Tim Daly and Dana Delaney and Clancy Brown, but they were like, no, it, like, once they got the animation back, they were like, it's not quite right. Like, those actors don't quite fit the way we're telling this story and the way we're animating it, which I totally understand. So them recasting it, but they got great choices, like Christina Hendricks as Lois Lane, because they were also like Dana Delaney's great. There's no replacing Dana Delaney, but they wanted to play her like slightly younger, so Christina Hendricks was the choice they decided to go with instead.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I was fine with Christina Hendricks as Lois. Like, this was one where it didn't take me out of the moment. Like, I think the only actor who I flat out was like, I know who that is, was Ed Asner. Like, when he shows it, like, I mean, obviously when you're like listening for the voices, you're like, okay, who is this person? Like, but whereas when we watched Superman Doomsday, there were multiple moments where it was just like, just stop.
Yeah. Yeah.
Also, I like, with that movie, I gotta say, rest in peace, Anne Heche. She was such a great Lois Lane. And
that was really awkward that we were like, don't love her performance, and then the episode dropped the week after she passed away.
Yeah. Here's the thing. I will say, retroactively, I think she's a great Lois Lane. And I still tear up every time she starts breaking down in front of Martha, talking about how much she loved Clark. So there you go.
Yeah, it was a good scene. It was just like, yeah.
Honestly, I'll also say that movie, I cried, but it's not that great.
Nah, it's rushed. Like, we talk about how like this movie had to like shorten everything down for 70 minutes. The Superman Doomsday movie was
movie.
It was like an abridged series movie. Like, they might as well just make pepper jokes throughout it.
It also, I mean, that was their very first foray into like the market of, let's do direct-to-DVD movies, but they're PG-13.
Yeah. Like,
we're going for like a higher age bracket than the previous stuff we made. Because of course they were making direct-to-DVD movies, but they were all Batman movies. But that was the first time they were like
Brainiac Attacks.
Yeah, okay, I'm sorry. We cannot forget Brainiac Attacks. I used to have that on
I wish I could.
Me too. Me too.
I used to have it on DVD.
I remember still kicking myself that I was just like, oh, I haven't seen this one yet. I might as well put it on one night.
I remember like it was on Cartoon Network, and it's like, oh, I didn't see this episode of Superman yet. Why does Lex Luthor sound weird? He doesn't sound like a Greek dude anymore.
Was it Powers Booth was either Brainiac or Luthor in that movie, and I can't remember. It was Luthor. Okay.
Yeah. Lance Henriksen was Brainiac, I think.
Okay, actually, Lance Henriksen as Brainiac is really good casting, honestly.
Neither of those are bad choices for casting. Yeah. It was just weird that they were using the TAS models, and also the deliveries were a little weird for it. Yeah. Like, if both of them had been in Super Friends, totally fine.
Oh yeah, totally. Yeah, like Lex was a little bit more bumbling in that movie, and it's like, what the heck's going on? Why? Where's my smooth Greek criminal?
Now, okay, I'm sorry. Now I want a new Super Friends show.
Oh,
I mean,
we need to make a sequel to Justice League Action. That was
such a good show,
right?
That was a fun little show.
It was so good. It was like, oh wow, you guys are really embracing the Bronze Age here with this show. What are we going to do next? Canceled because Cartoon Network just wants to make Teen Titans Go because it takes what, $2 to make an episode.
Hey, you know what? Teen Titans Go is good.
It's pretty funny.
Yeah,
that's my hot take for the episode. Get back to the movie. James Denton as Superman was the casting I was really unsure of when I first read that. But watching the movie, he's great. Yeah. He's perfect. He's perfect.
I think he does fine, but I will say that Superman in this is he has the same kind of voice that the comic Superman does, but or the comic, the All-Star Superman, the comic kind of style, but I don't know. There is an element, and I'm really not trying to compare him to like any of like the TS or the JLU or anything like that. Superman. I don't know. It just it requires a certain amount of warmth that I didn't quite get to stick some of those lines.
He was soft spoken enough to sell the Frank Quietly Superman, but like
yeah, I understand that. I do love like Alan mentioning the great addition that he wishes in the comic, that I also wish was in the comic, is that moment where Luthor says, if you had his powers, what would you do? And Clark just says, I'd help people. Like that delivery of that one line, that for me completely sold Denton as Clark / Superman.
Yeah, and actually I would say that his Clark is better than his Superman. And this is emphasized by that scene is such because that scene is so almost exactly taken from the comic and not compressed in any real way. Like it becomes a much bigger part of this movie, and there's a reason why that scene with Luthor, like the prison scene with Luthor, is so iconic just in general. But it's magnified by the animated movie.
Yeah. Also, the animation of Parasite is horrifying.
Oh yeah.
Yes.
There's the moment that really got me was later they Parasite extends its own mouth, just digs its hands into its mouth and just extends it on its own. I was just like, oh no, this is Guillermo del Toro is somewhere having a field day watching this.
Mm-hmm. Well, I saw someone compare it to a Studio Ghibli kind of thing, and I'm like, it's Studio Ghibli body horror.
Okay, yeah, I'm cool with that. I'm picturing Del Toro just sitting in his office, in his giant toy box house, and just sitting there watching this and going, why can't I do that? I want the money to do that.
And I'll be right next to him going, why aren't you directing a Superman movie? Come on, dude.
Del Toro would kill it on a Superman movie, honestly.
Especially if he did a Bizarro movie that was the cut Bizarro chapters from this.
Yes.
That would be
absolutely.
Oh man.
Give Del Toro $40 million and just go make that 40-minute movie.
We have this guy who's really great with genre and monster things, and we can't give him Superman or Etrigan. What's going on here?
I'm still bummed that we're not getting the Justice League Dark movie from him, because him directing Zatanna and Swamp Thing and Constantine and Deadman and Etrigan.
Etrigan, yeah. The Hot Monsters. Mm-hmm. Which is just Swamp Thing and Etrigan.
Yeah.
The Hot Monsters led by Zatanna.
And Zatanna, yeah.
God.
Before we move on to getting into the weeds of this movie, I do want to just round out a couple other interesting actor choices that are
please,
on here.
because I have one.
Yeah, because there's some fun ones. Linda Cardellini.
That was the one.
As
Nostalgia.
Oh, yeah.
I was she is given at most maybe 6 or 7 lines in this movie, but she nails all of them with just absolute I don't want to fucking be here energy.
Yeah.
Yep.
She's so
deeply
freaking
love her.
good.
Yes.
Yeah. And she's very underrated just in general as an actress. Like,
Yes.
she's part of that Freaks and Geeks crew that's like Seth Rogen and like Jason Segel and like, in fact, used to be like in a serious relationship with Jason Segel. And like,
yeah, but like she's like, of course she's Velma. She's fucking Velma. She kills it as Velma in not one but two movies. But like she returned to Scooby Doo and played the character of Hot Dog Water in my favorite version of Scooby Doo, Mystery Incorporated, and like got it confirmed that Velma is queer and is in a relationship with that character. Like, I love it. And then like her one scene in A Simple Favor. She's incredible. She's just like this chain-smoking, tattooed artist that I'm like, why aren't you in every movie? Please be in every movie.
Yeah. She'd make a great Lois Lane, too.
I still remember her from her one line in Dead Man on Campus.
Like, I'm just saying, she'd make a great Lois Lane.
Yeah.
Honestly, yeah. I'm still with CJ on Parker Posey.
Oh,
should
yeah.
have been Lois Lane.
Oh, absolutely.
And also, especially, I recently just rewatched for the umpteenth time Scream 3, and honestly, both her and Courtney Cox, great choices for Lois Lane.
Yeah.
Especially that late 90s, early 2000s. Like, either of them could have been a great live action Lois Lane. But like, I'm kind of bummed because I love Henry Cavill as Superman. I like the idea, and I just give him a good script and a director who understands the material. I couldn't see either of them with him. It just I don't know. It doesn't like.
Yeah, well, and at this point, all of these actresses that we're talking about, you kind of need to be doing an older Superman story anyway.
Yeah. So Brandon
like
Routh
Carlini probably could get away with being
Brandon Routh.
Yeah, Brandon Routh would be.
Brandon Routh and Parker Posey had a lot of chemistry in that like one scene they shared together. I'm just saying.
Yeah. So let them. So okay, here we go. We got our Del Toro Superman movie.
Yeah.
Brandon Routh, Parker Posey. Let Del Toro go off. And yeah, it will make.
Fuck it, set it on Earth 2 and just have it be like explicitly like a little bit older timeline, and then you could have Power Girl in there. You can have like Infinity Inc.
Oh, I'm making myself. I'm making us so sad by all these amazing ideas we're having.
Yeah, this is a brainstorming session. Look, other great actors in this. Just stay on actors because, like, Linda Carlini, great. Like,
yeah,
also
but we also got, we got
roles.
John DiMaggio and
that's exactly what I was about to say.
John DiMaggio
and Steve Bloom.
Yes, as Samson and Atlas, and like it's like these two actors are so good at playing the broiest of bros. And like Alan put it best, and he's like, these guys were just like, what you want, bro? Like we're gonna steal. Like we're like. Before the term Chad existed, they were the Chads of Chads.
They are the Bill and Ted of strongmen right there.
Right.
No, don't you dare besmirch the names of Bill and Ted, of Theodore Logan Esquire, or Bill Preston. Don't you dare do that. Ted Theodore Logan. I had to get the names right.
Like they should have just redone. Like I know they did the Superman and Doomsday thing on the telephone booth for that one cover, but I'm like, just do Samson and Atlas. They have a time machine. I don't think they know how to spell their names either. It's perfect.
Wait, hold up. Now I'm imagining a world where version of this where Keanu and Alex Winter were voicing these characters, and I really wish that had happened.
They can wear the
love Steve Bloom, love John DiMaggio, Keanu and Alex would have been really great. Though.
Yeah, they could wear the muscle suits from the third movie too.
Oh my no! They were just playing Samson and Atlas.
Yeah,
that's actually what it was.
Yeah.
That's all they were doing.
Yeah, and I'm glad that scene didn't get that scene did not get cut, because that easily could have been another one where you just kind of omit it. You just do, Lois like has powers for a minute and then like move on to the next thing.
Yeah. It was important to have that though, because they are like they're the ones who are there to have the time, like reinforce the theme of time throughout this story.
Yeah.
Because time is such a big part of the comic. It's like McDuffie understands that, like, that being such a big part, you can't cut that out of the movie. So you want to make sure to, if you're gonna cut out Bizarro, like there should be like you should at least keep all the other pieces that reinforce the theme of time and how much we have left and what our legacy and what we're leaving as our legacy. Like keep as much of that as possible. So it's important to have Samson and Atlas still there to reinforce that theme and showing Superman the newspaper and the Ultra Sphinx was there to because Samson and Atlas are bros who don't understand being cool.
Yeah. Plus, they
think they're cool. They're not.
They also bring up the fact that, like, Superman has to commit his 12 labors before he dies. So it's like you have that kind of like dramatic question, like hanging over the story, like, will Superman be able to complete these 12 labors? Which I don't think they really number the labors in this movie.
No, in the movie they didn't. They don't
in this.
They just say
yeah.
they just. I honestly, I believe it was Samson who mentioned it. He just said, all he says is, but like, legend tells that before you died, you like enacted like the greatest feats of your career before you died.
Yeah, they overshoot that a little bit, or like it exists as a concept in here, but it's not really the thrust of this all. Like, whereas the comic is structured as 12 issues, so that you can use this referring thing of like, yeah, it's 12 labors and whatnot. JD, I think you brought up a really good point that this movie also doesn't spend as much time on time. One of the big things when looking at it in retrospect, the comic has lots of time travel elements. There's so many things going on in there. Like another thing they cut out is the chronovore. Like the whole that whole experience there is like, yeah, that's time as a literal killer.
Yeah.
That's
and you have to keep those elements in here to keep some of the same thematic points, but you don't have time to reinforce.
That's one of the glaring omissions. Just that the funeral in Smallville is one of the reasons why it's like this movie doesn't fare well to me, because it's like funeral in Smallville basically sets up for me a lot of what like who this Clark is as a person, like who he was, who he is going to be, and what he will like last onto the world. Like, if anything, they could have cut out the Kryptonian stuff with Bar-El and Lilo instead of
I was thinking about that.
Yeah, I can agree with that. And you're right with having a Superboy saying, I can save him, I can save everyone, and then cutting later in the story to a Superman who is just like, I am on death's door, and not having the mentality of I can save everyone. It's just, I'm going to save as many as I can.
Yeah,
I'm gonna do my. He's grown into himself enough to understand that he can't do everything, but he can do more. He can do more than others, so he's going to use what he has to do as much as he can.
Yeah, and to me, it's like it's more instrumental because like the final image, of course, is him in the sun, and like the payoff is going to be him being the Golden Superman that shows up in that story, where he's like, which one of my descendants are you? And he's like, that's funny, because I'm you.
Yeah,
just better now.
Yeah, like that was the thing that June brought up last time, where the ending of this comic is actually rather melancholy if you do not know about this broader like Superman meta story that Morrison has in their mind.
Yeah.
That Superman eventually will be reunited with Lois in the 853rd century, and that everything is going to be great, and that Kyle Rayner is going to have a really bad headache trying to remember it. And
if you didn't go back, if you didn't like years and years before read JLA 1,000,000,
right? Because Morrison can just have fun with like, here's all the crazy ideas I'm throwing out there, and so the resolution of this story they published 6 years before.
Yeah.
Yeah, something like that. And actually, I want to say something on when y'all were talking about the ending of the comic and also the ending of the movie as well. How like the image of Clark in the sun and put he is a farm like Alan mentioned, pointed out, he's a farmer's kid. Like he is, so he understands that yes, he can do all these things, but he has to put in the work. Yeah. Morrison did confirm their inspiration for that image was like images from communist images of how they depicted laborers in their propaganda, and also directly William Blake's Rational Man piece as well. Mm-hmm. The Rational Man.
Yeah, this is why every time I look at that picture of Superman, I think he should be wearing overalls.
Yeah, yes, exactly.
I thought he did wear overalls. So I'm like, where did he put on the overalls? Is there sun overalls? Like, what's going on here?
Right.
Yeah, okay, yes, because when you mentioned it on the last episode, I was like, wait, is he not wearing overalls in that?
No, he's just wearing his regular suit.
Yeah.
He just looks like he should be wearing overalls. So we all mentally in our head put him in overalls.
Put Clark in look, Henry Cavill, I'm sorry, please wear overalls more, is what we're saying.
Henry Cavill, wear less sleeves.
Yes, please.
All of these are things we can agree with, right?
Yeah. See, like I saw like overalls and like little thing in his mouth, like
the straw pick.
Like a
wheat,
wheat.
yeah, wheat in his mouth,
Like grain or
like
something.
hat. I'm like, okay, yeah, he's being. Wait, hold on. No, he's just wearing his costume.
I'm sorry, I was spacing out when we were talking about Henry Cavill with less shirt.
See,
I spaced out.
this is why they need to have me design the Superman costumes from now on.
Just let us do it. We're
Yeah.
the committee.
What are you doing? Superman
This
just looks
is-
like a farmer.
I'm making all the committees today.
Yeah,
Screw it.
let's write a Superman 3000 document for DC Comics, and hopefully we'll make this comic happen, and not get it sabotaged.
What is your elevator pitch? Sexy farmer Superman.
I always said Superman's not your dad. Superman is daddy, and that's what I believe.
Sexy Daddy
Yeah.
Superman is back, baby. Woo!
Yep, sexy daddy Superman,
And
baby.
Yes.
Philip Kennedy
The
Johnson
Authority.
is doing that. So
Oh, Brandon Routh, we want you back, man.
for the
We
record,
really want you back.
for the record, I've been saying Superman is daddy since before them. So it was me. I did it.
Oh yeah,
Yeah,
No,
I will give credit where credit is due, but I feel like Superman and the Authority, that episode, like Duke started it, we cemented it with that episode, though.
Yeah.
yeah. I mean, like all of a sudden it was just like, yep, sexy daddy Superman. That's the way to
Yep.
go. There's a reason why the meta text in the file, if you go like download it and then like look for the actual description, is just sexy daddy Superman.
Yeah. It's
And
why
of
also
course, the art for that episode is the panel where he is shirtless, sweating with a towel around.
Oh yeah,
him.
on purpose. Yeah. No,
Yeah.
this episode has just turned into us thirsting about Morrison's depictions of Superman.
What that suit, man. That was an awesome suit for that book.
That was a great
It's
suit
such a
too.
great
it was
Yeah.
so good.
Yeah, most of Superman's costumes have been pretty good. Like, I think the worst you could say are like the weird fitting stitched ones from certain live action adaptations, like the serials.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
whatever.
But they're fine. But you know what? I still love them. And Electric Blue Superman, looking at you, we love you. We love you.
all for an Electric Blue Superman. All right, let's actually though try to focus a little bit on the actual thing that we're talking about, which is All-Star Superman, the property and the movie as a whole. So one thing that occurred to me, well, rather, it was brought up, and that in the last time when we were talking about it, as a thing that I'd kind of just assumed, because I think the comic more sort of backfilled this, and it also kind of just fits Morrison's general ethos of superpowers can lead you to good. In my head, the revelation that Luthor has in this, which I think is more it's more pronounced ultimately in this, but in retrospect, I had thought that he had the same basic turn in the comic of once everything clicks, it's like, oh shit, we need to do better, and that's there, but it's much more so here. And it occurred to me between recording the last one and this, where I'm like, wait, I've seen Frank Quitely draw that same basic thing though, and the reason why is because in the Authority, there was the issue where the evil version of the Doctor, eventually his powers caught up to him, and he was like, oh yeah, I want to be good, because powers, like, it fills him with empathy and so forth. And I'm like, wait a second, it is definitely still a Morrison thing, and Morrison was helping out Mark Millar a lot on the writing duties on that one, because Mark Millar had a hard time like living up to his deadlines. So
Yeah.
I'm wondering.
Yeah. Also, I will say, probably the Ultimates. Like, I don't want to be disparaging too much on this podcast, but the Ultimates is a comic that I'm not a fan of. But any good out of that comic, I credit to Morrison, because Morrison credits himself for that as well.
Yeah. Sorry, did I say the Ultimates? I meant the Authority.
No, you said the Authority.
It is
There's-
okay.
but they worked on both.
Yeah. Millar went off of the Authority to do the Ultimates. Yeah. So I'm a little curious if, like, because they were all like exchanging ideas back in the day. Like the Superman 2000 pitch, was Morrison and Millar and Wade and
And Tom Perry.
Tom Payer.
yeah, Tom Payer. Like,
He's following me. Let's be nice. Hi, Tom.
but they all were just like exchanging ideas, and you can see like this cross pollination going through it all. And then, in fact, I was watching an interview of Morrison and Wade talking about like a chance encounter that helped like drive Superman, like All-Star Superman.
I know what you're talking about. You're talking about the Comic-Con experience.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, you guys keep talking. I'm gonna go grab my copy of Super Gods, where I'm going to read the part of that book where that happened, because they mentioned that in the book.
Yeah, the point is that nothing is created in a vacuum. So like Morrison is interacting as much with everyone else, but it was just interesting for me to realize that like the same basic facial expression of supervillain like holding their face, being like, "What the fuck have I done?" Oh my god!
And it makes sense too, because it's like, you know, when the Superman 2000 pitch, you know, like fell through, thanks Eddie Berganza, you fucking hack. They basically took their ideas separately and, you know, went on to do other things. So I can see Grant Morrison going like, okay, I like this idea and I like this idea, I like this idea, and I really want to do this idea with Solaris. So I'm just going to make my own thing eventually. And then, you know, feel like the history behind All-Star was like Jim Lee wanted to do something, and wasn't Grant approached to do the Jim Lee Superman book before Brian Azzarello?
Oh, I don't know about that necessarily. There was this whole moment of Jim Lee like doing iconic takes on characters, which, you know, is ultimately why All-Star Batman and Robin the Boy Wonder was him with Frank Miller.
Well, it was like DC's kind of partnership with Jim Lee was like Jim Lee wants to do a Batman book and a Superman book, and so I think Hush came out of the Batman one, and with Superman it was originally going to be Grant Morrison, and then it became For Tomorrow. So we could have had a All-Star Superman by Jim Lee,
which, you know,
it feels weird.
It feels a little weird, but like would have been fine.
It would look cool,
you know?
But it's like aesthetically, Frank leans better towards what like kind of like the retro pop version Grant Morrison was leaning towards in the Bronze Age depictions of these characters.
Oh yeah. No, Frank Whiteley and Morrison as collaborators are like two peas in a pod. It makes a lot of sense.
I would love to have a Superman Batman All-Star series.
Like a World's Finest. Well, we're kind of getting that right now with
World's Finest, and Mark Waid is writing it.
Yeah.
Yeah,
and it's
with Dan
great.
Mora. Like it's
actually
it's so good, and the Doom Patrol shows up.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's pretty close to being an all-star.
Yeah.
It's basically exactly what I wanted in a comic.
Yeah, it's Mark Waid coming back after so long and being like, "Hey, I still got it."
Yeah. God, Mark Waid.
Like the Robin issue when he's traveled back in time and joins the circus is like, oh right, I forgot how fucking good Robin stories can be. Like,
yeah.
Like Mark Waid is so good.
I enjoyed it too because like Superman had his shirt off for most of that issue, and I'm like,
also true. Yeah,
this is quality.
And like all the women were like on him, like,
oh yeah,
like a bees to honey. Like it was amazing.
And guess what? I'm there with them.
Yeah,
I'm there with them.
So JD, you were pulling a quote from Super Gods.
I do. I have the section. This is from Grant Morrison's book Super Gods. I believe it's the last chapter, Star Legend Superhero Super God. And so this comes right after. This is actually the section where Morrison does mention the Superman 2000 pitch, which is also originally called Superman Now, and that was also the original title for the comic. So, like that had been rejected, and Morrison was now kind of stuck with like what they were going to do. So, quote: "Stuck with the problem, I found myself chewing it over with my JLA editor Dan Raspler at 1 a.m. in an airless hotel room overlooking the naval yards of San Diego Harbor. We were there for 1999's Comic-Con. To clear our heads, we went downstairs and crossed the street, an oddly landscaped liminal zone between the rail tracks and the city. We were deep in discussion, debating earnestly the merits and demerits of a married Superman. We both spotted a couple of men crossing the tracks into town. One was an ordinary-looking bearded dude, at first sight like any of 100,000 comics fans, but the other was Superman. He was dressed in a perfectly tailored red, blue, and yellow costume. His hair was slicked back with a kiss curl, and unlike the often weedy or paunchy Superman who paraded through the convention halls, he was trim, buff, and handsome. He was the most convincing Superman I've ever seen, looking somewhat like a cross between Christopher Reeve and the actor Billy Zane. I knew of visitation when I saw one. Racing to intercept the pair, Dan and I explained who we were, what we were doing, and asked, Superman, with quotes there, if he wouldn't mind answering a few questions. He didn't, and sat on a concrete baller with one knee to his chest shield, completely relaxed. It occurred to me that this was exactly how Superman would sit. A man who was invulnerable to all harm would be always relaxed and at ease. He'd have no need for the kind of physically aggressive posture superheroes tended to go in for. I suddenly began to understand Superman in a new way. We asked questions: how do you feel about Lois? What about Batman? And received answers in the voice and persona of Superman. I don't think Lois will ever really understand me, or why I do what I do. Or, Batman sees only the darkness in people's hearts. I wish he could see the best. That seemed utterly convincing. The whole encounter lasted an hour and a half, then he left graciously and on foot, I'm sad to say. Dan and I stared at each other in the fuzzy sodium glare of the street lamps, then quietly returned to our rooms. Inflamed, I stayed awake the whole night, writing about Superman until the fuming August sun rose above the warships, the hangars, and the Pacific. I was now certain we could keep the marriage to Lois and simply make it work to our advantage.
See, the only thing that I find wild about that is that I watched the interview, and both Mark Waid was also being cut to and was also part of telling that story. And while I could imagine Mark Waid had just heard the story enough times that he could tell it, I thought he said he was there. So I don't. It wasn't wild because that is the story. Yeah. Like that's exactly it. Like the whole. I'm so comfortable and whatnot.
Wasn't there a picture of them with Mark Waid? Because I remember seeing like a picture online with Grant Morrison, a Superman cosplayer, and Mark Waid, who's like grinning ear to ear.
It probably happened. I don't know if it was the same. It could have also been the same person, probably. Just taken later.
Yeah.
They could have just found each other. If it just could just like happened years later. It's just like Morrison Lois like, it's you.
It's you.
You're Superman.
You're Superman.
It's got to be wild to have like a famous comic book writer at the time like go, can I talk to you?
Not only that, but this is 1999. This is like Grant Morrison at the peak of their powers. Like they're almost off to like within a year they're going to leave DC and go and write X-Men. So they're still writing JLA and doing all these things. And it's like you get this bald Scotsman just going, "Hi, I'm Grant Morrison. I need to talk to you." Like of course you'd be like, "Yes, I'm Superman."
Right.
You are whoever Morrison tells you are.
Yeah, that's got to be just a wild experience in general.
Yeah, that's now the mantra of the Guild of Morrison experts. You are who Morrison says you are.
Unless you're Buddy Baker.
So, segueing back to also very true. Segueing back to the movie.
I see you.
Jmike, so of this table, you are the only one who came in movie first. But from your standpoint, coming in from the movie, and as we've talked about, like the events of the movie are all pretty one-to-one for things that happen in the comics. They just overshoot. Was there anything that caught you by surprise structurally out, like where it's like, oh, I'm surprised this thing occurred here. Yeah, I would have thought that if they were going to do this, it would have been at a different spot, or I didn't expect a gap period. Like what was your surprise going from movie to comic?
That there was so much stuff I had never seen. Like I finally read the comic for our recording, our 6-hour recording that we did. And I was like, oh, good, cool. Oh, there's a time monster. Oh, okay. There's the whole Jimmy Olsen subplot. Oh, okay. There is a Bizarro Underverse subplot. It was like, holy crap, there's so much stuff here. And I understand why they had to condense it. It's still like, a good movie, but like there's just so much missing from the movie. And I'm like, oh man, I wonder how, like now you kind of wonder, like, I wonder how that would actually look and play out in the movie if they had done it. But I really like Black Kryptonite.
That movie's so good. I do believe that, like, I think the one thing that I am okay with not being here just for the sheer complexity of it is Bizarro World. Yeah. Just the complexity of the language of how that's written is like, that would be so difficult, not only for the not just for the actors performing it, but also as a viewer listening to that. And I'm like, it would screw with my brain too much. So I understand that getting cut out, but I do wish we did have the going back in time, defeating the Chronivore
Yeah.
And I wish we had the Jimmy Olsen bit. I wish we had the issue 10 never ending, which just a day in the life of Superman. I wish we had that of just like Superman, like he defeats a giant robot and helps a ward of children, helps a children's ward in a hospital. And yeah, when Alan and June were talking about like rereading it every few years, I had realized like, oh wait, I haven't reread it in a long time, and I was gonna reread it for this and I forgot to. So like last night I watched the movie twice back to back. I watched it on its own and then I watched it right after with the Tim Morrison commentary. I was like, I have enough time, I can watch it twice. The second time was more like listen to a podcast, because that's sometimes how I see there are some commentary tracks that are slightly more engaging with the picture itself, but this one was more of just Bruce Timm and Grant Morrison having a conversation.
So I'm curious, because I haven't watched it with the commentary track, and I love me a commentary track. What were big takeaways? Like what did Grant think of this?
Morrison loves this movie a lot, and something that really like surprised me was what Morrison like how Morrison views this in relation to other superhero movies. Because Morrison said on the comment, and now granted, this was when the commentary track was made for the Blu-ray, so this was like, at this point I feel like it was like 10 years ago. Yeah, when did this movie come out? It was 2012.
It was 2011.
2011. Okay, yeah. So it probably would have been probably late 2011, early 2012 when that was recorded. So at the time, so about 10 years ago, Morrison said this was their third favorite superhero movie, and yes, and number 2 was Unbreakable, the M. Night Shyamalan movie, which great movie.
Totally.
Number 1, Number 1 was Disney's Hercules.
Yes.
Really?
Yes.
They say that and I'm like, Morrison, you maniac. I love you.
Yep. It's the best Superman movie ever made.
I don't agree.
Christopher Reeve has some words for you.
I love Christopher Reeve. I do. I really do. But like Disney's Hercules, it's like you guys got the Clark and Lois dynamic so well that it's really hard to see them wear these Greek costumes when I know that's just Clark and Lois right here. And obviously Phil is, Perry White. Come on, Danny.
I would take
Danny
a Danny DeVito.
Yeah, Danny DeVito is Perry White. I'm thinking about that and I was like, I want that instead. I'm sorry. I'm Ed Asner. We love you. I'm sorry, but Danny DeVito.
That could actually be pretty funny.
Kent, where are you? I'm coming out of the couch now.
And James Woods is like Lex Luthor. That was so good. They used it for that cartoon, Justice League Action, that Cartoon Network gave up on back, before James Woods became James Woods. So
yeah.
Well, before we all knew who James was.
It really was.
Yeah,
it was.
Yeah, it still baffles me that man, the man that we know who he is now, was in Videodrome and Salvador. That doesn't make sense to me. But hey, you'll do things for money. I'm still glad that we got him as Owlman. Speaking of Grant Morrison
adaptations, really he was pretty great as Owlman.
Yeah, he's a great Owlman.
Yeah. It's a shame because it's like him playing Hades. He loved playing Hades so much. He would return for anything. They're like, yeah, just give me the money and I'll do it. Like the Kingdom Hearts games, he came back for Hades. What was it? The Hercules cartoon series? Wasn't he Hades for that?
Yeah, the animated series that accompanied the movie.
Yeah, he was like he's such a team player,
but also a
disappointment.
Disappointment. That's the concise way to put it.
Too bad we got James Woods when we should have had James Shoulds.
Oh man, I really wish that James Woods was like running for office for something, and then someone comes in and has that as their slogan campaign. It's just like, yeah, my opponent, what a dick.
Well, they could actually put that in like Family Guy, because in that James Woods is,
isn't
he a politician at one point? There's definitely like they make a lot of James Woods jokes, and he like shows up at one point.
Yeah, he shows like there's that episode where he and Peter become friends, and then later he falls in love with Lois's sister.
Oh yeah,
yeah, and like Lois's sister is like known for like marrying a lot of people, so like Lois is like not cool with it. but Peter's like, yeah, but it's James Woods. He's my friend.
We're in danger of going too far at this point.
Yeah, let's not do this.
We need to reel this one back in. So like, you know, we're kind of we've been circling around this all because like the actual events of this movie, again, as we've said, all happen in the comics. So when we went issue by issue in the comics, we've gone through all of the big ticket items. There's a couple minor differences, as we said. Like there's the great bit that McDuffie introduced of the like, what would you do with superpowers? I'd help people. You would. Like the wonderful stuff that's in there. I think there's a lot of like polishing of already like very very obvious gems that are going on throughout this whole thing. Like I said, the confrontation with Luthor at the end, where he feels much more indebted to society and comes off really making a full-on heel turn or a heel face turn. Whereas in the comic, it's there, but I think it's less like pronounced in it all. I think it works better in the actual animated finale. Like those are all things that work really well about this all. And then the other side of it is that, again, we said this at the beginning, this is a mass market thing. You know, like it is much easier to convince a person to watch a 70-minute cartoon than, say, sit down with 12 comic issues and read this incredibly dense thing. So my question to the table, because, again, all the events happen, and, like, while you might think, like, all right, yeah, Bar-El and Lilo could have been moved and replaced with a different thing, you know, it would have been nice to have the Chronovore, all those elements, like, but my question to the table is, does this effectively sell All-Star Superman as a bigger story? And does this effectively sell Superman, which is the goal of this whole project in general, which is like, let's tell the best version of a Superman story to get people who kind of wrote off Superman back on board?
I think it does. I do think it does a great job representing the comic itself and the story it's telling. And it's clear that the story they're telling is within the framework of, if you have a cursory like knowledge of the DCAU, you can kind of get behind this because, you know, Ma Kent shows up despite the fact that the Kents are dead in the comics, and just kind of the overall vibe of it feels like you can kind of like watch this as a kind of loose extension of Superman TS. I do think it does a great job selling this version of Superman to like people who kind of fell off the character for a bit.
I agree. I agree with it selling the comic and the character. I have nothing else to add. Duke said it best.
I do want to point out that they did cut my favorite line from the comic, and it's such an awful pun. But in the prison interview, when Lex Luthor's talking about the Bibliobot, he says it could recite Moby Dick at a frequency that could shatter Earth, right? Literally boring,
so boring.
The Earth.
Yeah.
Lex Luthor thinks Moby Dick is boring, and I think that's a great pun.
He would think.
Right?
What a dick. What a dick.
And that's why I love
James
Lex.
Woods.
James Woods.
Here's the thing. I'm honestly shocked we never got James Woods as Luthor in something.
Justice League Action.
Was he?
Yeah.
Oh crap.
Yeah, it was funny.
Yeah. Yeah.
We're not deviating back to James Woods.
Sorry.
Right now. Sorry. I made that joke. I did not intend for us to go back that far.
Giving him less airtime is the best choice.
We're sorry.
The James Woods episode's later.
Yeah. No, it's not. No, it's not. Hey, last thing we'll say. James Woods, fuck you. The official stance of Men of Steel.
Sure. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's fine. I mean,
one of the co-hosts of Men of Steel agree with our guest.
He's a creep.
You know, setting the course for our show.
I'm taking over the podcast case.
Jmike, for you, since you came to this movie first, like in terms of like selling the story, like as far as being a compelling thing and whatnot, like did that all work for you? Did this make you like Superman more? What was its impact on you?
It makes me appreciate Superman more. Like, so whenever you have a big comics person tell you, like, hey, you should really get in this character because of blah, blah, blah. For Superman, one of the first things they tell you is you got to read All-Star Superman. It's like your gateway into the Superman mythos. And like, that's from like a bunch of people I talked to at like cons and MagFest and all that other stuff. And it kind of rings true because this is like the perfect example of what it means to be Superman. And do I think I have some nitpicks here or there? Maybe. Sure. But it's still like one of the best, it's one of the best things if you ever want to get into the Superman mythos. Period. And sound. Bar none. Without a doubt.
I agree.
Yeah, I mean it's very digestible. Like the comic itself is a pretty quick read, even if it
Is that
is
a quick read? I don't think that's a quick read case.
I it was breezy when I read it or reread it for this. Like
By your third read through,
it's not as quick a reread as like say rereading Death of Superman, which was like, oh yeah, panel. Yeah, fight. Well, and there's interesting stuff going on in there. Like when that episode will be dropping soon, and it's we go into all the issues leading up to it, doing the whole like fewer and fewer panels, and it's really cool. There's cool stuff going on. But yeah, the fight's a fight. Whereas in this, the fight is usually not how you get to the win. You know, like yeah, sure, Superman punches a star so hard that it explodes at one point. And we haven't even talked about Solaris in this yet, and I love it.
Oh,
it's just like yeah. But fighting is rarely the main way that Superman overcomes a thing. Like the whole point of him defeating Luthor by way of using time itself is to show that like violence isn't the solution to most problems.
It's kind of the interesting thing because like I know a lot of people have problems with Superman because they think he's like overpowered and like, oh, all you have to do is write action stories. And you know, you have that video of Grant Morrison saying like, you just give him people problems. But with like the way Grant Morrison approaches Superman, it's very much like if you're going to put it in video game terms, he's like a role playing character. Where he's more about conversational conflicts and ideological conflicts and just like, working things out and seeing like what the heart of the story is and how can he make things right. And that's the key to the Superman story. It's in figuring out like, okay, I'm placed in this situation. How can I make the best out of this? Or how can I make sure someone who's weaker or smaller doesn't get stepped on? And that's like why I loved reading this, because it's like, wow, you don't think about Superman being someone that just like, speaks through his problems like a lot of people would say they did. And that's kind of like what changed me about like writing this character. It's like, okay, you have to think about it as an RPG, as like, Knights of the Republic, where you're doing more speech checks than you'll eventually punch a bad guy, but
diplomacy,
diplomacy, right?
Yeah, now that you say that, you reminded me of that. So there is a TTRPG podcast that I've been working on with some other people for a while that will eventually see the light of day, hopefully very soon. And my character is the legacy character in the team, and they're the third in line, and it's like a family name. And the name of Atomic Man in this world is like seen as like this is like the Superman of this world. And now that you mention this, I realize like that's how myself and our GM Armand have been playing these characters of like my I am the teen sidekick that my uncle used to be, and my uncle's now the second Atomic Man after his father, my grandfather, and that's how we've been playing the character of like we talk through our issues, and like whenever we do get into like physical conflicts, of course we're rolling dice, and we're taking chances with the outcomes, but that's also what we're doing there is like talking out like, okay, how do we handle this in a way that we're not going to hurt, like we don't want to hurt people here. We want to cause the least amount of damage here. We want to make sure that everyone is safe. What is the best option to do that? And that's what Superman does all the time. Superman is calculating these situations at lightning speed all the time, trying to make sure that there is a good outcome for everyone, even in some cases, even the antagonist of the situation. Is like he realizes that that there are sometimes who he's in conflict with is correct in some way but not going about it the right way, so he wants to talk them down, or sometimes he does realize like, well, maybe brute strength is the best option in this particular situation, but not every situation. And the movie sells that very well, because that was the whole point of the comic and like seeing that the cover of that first issue, which is now the cover of like the widely available trade that we see today, of Superman just look like sitting and with his knees up to his chest and looking back at the reader, and like that's Superman. he is there watching over us, just checking things out, making sure everything's okay, and looking back at us going, hey, I'm here for you.
Yeah. It's the big dog situation. It's the when you're afforded the ability to be relaxed, you can make sure that you're checking in on everyone else. Like if you're not scared and not bork, like you can focus on being there and protective and happy and chill. And that's sort of like the tendency in like temperament, with larger dogs versus smaller dogs right there. Can you have a really good little dog? Yeah. Will they murder snakes? Yeah. Like
will they also be very silly? Absolutely.
Oh yeah, well they all will be, and like Superman has the potential to be silly. Like one of my favorite innovations of the modern era of Superman stuff is Superman as dad, not sexy dad, but just like as dad, like as on Superman and Lois, like him as the coach of the football team as a way of embarrassing his sons on purpose is great.
Yeah,
like,
Case, you need to stop selling me on this damn show.
I know. It's just. And it's those little moments that are so good in there, but
Or actually, it's like saying that too. I would also want to mention the Tomasi Gleason Superman run that was part of the Rebirth era of John Kent having like them bringing in the pre-crisis Superman and Lois and having John Kent there as a small boy and Superman getting to just be a dad on a farm.
Yeah, those are great moments there, and here we are getting a lot of that. We're denied Superman as a husband, we're denied Superman as a father in this. Like this, even though we understand that there will be a second generation, that they go much more explicitly about how it works in the animated one. By the way,
when Luthor says, healthy human ovum, I'm like, oh wow, they just like McDuffie just like explicitly said what they said, like. What he said, and Quintum saying like, well, they said they always wanted to have kids, and like I will say like that moment I do like that better than just for preference like I like that more than the comic where in the comic Quintum makes it sound like he's like, I'm doing this because we need it, and I'm doing this because I'm a mad scientist, and here it's like Quintum is like, it definitely makes it seem like after this he is going to sit down with Lois and have a conversation. And be like, is this something that you want? It's
less of a science experiment. There's a little bit more attention to all that.
And I appreciate it too, because it's like, I usually kind of go back and forth. Do I like this change? Do I not like this change? But like just the performance alone, just like Lex going like, okay, you know what? The only good I can do in my remaining time, because I am going on a death sentence, I will help create another Superman for him. And that's where I start crying, where it's like, okay, now you show that like this guy is capable of being a good person in his final moments. And that's why I do applaud the movie for at least making that massive change, because it sells the emotional impact of like this Lex. Now this might be controversial, but even though Superman is, the title character, is All-Star Superman really Lex Luthor's story?
I think more so in the animated version.
I would say, I was gonna say the same thing. Like it definitely makes that more so in the movie, especially with them using the comic panels from the opening of from the opening of the first issue, and having Anthony LaPaglia as Luthor narrating the opening of the movie, and then at the end reinforcing it, it makes it seem as though this is Luthor telling the story.
Yeah, this is Luthor's redemption, and that's why it made me love the movie a little bit more. Where it's like, okay, I can get behind this. Even though I'm still not fond of the Varel and Leela. Sorry. I'm sorry.
Well, hey, it feels Arnold just weirder in this because
it is. You're right. It is weird.
Yeah, I mean, compared to the comic, because in the comic, I mean, it's already kind of a tangent, but like a lot of the issues have been kind of a tangent. Where this movie is more streamlined, and like you pointed out, it is more focused on Luthor. I think you can make that strong case there for the animated movie. And I think that the comic is really more trying to do, like, here's the world of Superman, and that's why we get to spend some time with all these characters. Like, we spend time with Jimmy, and in a way that we just don't in this movie. Like, that's an area where I think the movie had to make the choice in terms of, like, well, we can't be everywhere. Like, we can't even get in as much of Lois's head as we'd like to. The whole paranoia issue before she gets her powers.
Yeah.
Like, they do that a little bit, but like you can't get in her brain the same way. Like you know, so we have to move through that story a little bit faster. You know, we can't dwell on it, but we do dwell on Luthor. We do dwell on him in the prison. Like that whole scene is a very large chunk of this movie, and his ultimate resolution is much more emphasized.
Yeah, I also do love that even though we don't have the Jimmy issue, we do have his introduction being in the dress from the comic.
Yes,
to show that, and him being him being asked like, "Are you on a job, Jimmy?" He goes, "No, why?" It's like once again showing Jimmy does not give up, just has no fucks to give. He's like, I do what sounds fun and interesting, and also I want to help my friends.
Jimmy Olsen's maximized potential is Tintin by way of Bugs Bunny, and I stand by that.
Okay, I agree.
Because you got like the child adventurer thing, and you got Bugs Bunny, who's like an agent of chaos, a bit of a trickster, but like he deals with like bullies all the time. So
everyone go read the Matt Fraction, Steve Lieber, Superman's pal Jimmy Olsen comic. It's incredible.
They made a Tintin reference too, so like I'm not alone.
Yeah. That is actually like the one thing I really regret about this. You know, cool stuff aside, like important stuff aside, I feel like media doesn't appreciate Jimmy Olsen enough.
No, in fact, I think that is the, like, I do love the Chronovore, but I think the big change I would say is drop Bar on Lilo and make it and include Jimmy and have more Jimmy.
Yeah, I'd probably just say like don't make it 70 minutes, just make it 90 minutes. Just let it breathe for a bit because you're missing a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, so here's a question that I was curious about. So, yes, the idea of a two-part, 270-minute like extravaganza doing issues 1 through 6 and then 7 through 12 appeals to all of us as comics fans who would love to see it properly adapted into an animated format. But I don't know if that necessarily would have gone over well for someone coming in totally blind. No. I don't think it would do its job of being like, are you into like, do you not know what's going on with Superman, but you're culturally aware that there is a character like that? Check this out, and then all of a sudden you'll like Superman. Like that's the goal of this movie. Yeah. Like make people like Superman. I don't know if I don't know if 2 70-minute movies would have worked.
I don't either.
No, I do think this is the best version of what we could of any version we could have had. I think this is the best one.
Well, I don't mind Duke's suggestion of like a 90-minute and you get a little bit more from the comic in here, but I do appreciate that if they're told like, hey, you've got 70 minutes, like this is a pretty efficient, lean cut.
That's what I mean is like them have like all these movies having the time constraint until they decide, well, Batman movies get to be longer.
Of course.
Except for the time where we're going to adapt Doomsday of the Death of Superman again. I do appreciate the way it was adapted here. It's like if you're gonna have to have those time constraints, adapting it this way was a good choice.
Yeah, I don't want to do a 2-part movie because the thing about like 2-part movies is like narratively speaking, it's like you need a conclusive cliffhanger between part 1 to usher in a part 2, and there's no way you can do that with All-Star Superman because like the midway through is the Lex Luthor prison interview and then the death of Pa Kent.
Well, then it's the Chronovore scene, so you would end with Pa Kent's death.
Yeah, and then to be like, are we beginning the movie again? Like, what's going on here? Which is why I always felt like, you just have the Pa Kent's death be like packaged towards the end of Act 2 in my hypothetical 90-minute animated movie as like, here's him coming to, grips with the fact like, okay, I still can't beat time. Death is a victor of all of us. But no matter what has happened for a reason, and I should take stock in that. And here's the future coming to say thank you.
I mean, I guess if you were going to do a 2-part movie, you would end with him getting captured by the Bizarros and dragged down. And then you might want to shuffle some of the stories around. But like, again, I don't think a 2-parter, like, I don't think you could just tell a person who has no interest in Superman, check out this 2-part movie.
Like also conversely, like I keep thinking about like The Long Halloween. And, I've made my feelings on those movies very clear, where it's like, The Long Halloween is structured similar to All-Star Superman, where it is very much just 12 episode vignettes with one overarching story, and how like you sometimes it's probably for the best you just truncate that to the essential 3 acts. Because like with Long Halloween, you still had to tackle the story where like Bruce Wayne's like in Poison Ivy's thrall for like 3 months. And that fills up so much time in part 2 where it's like, you could have cut this out. This doesn't really have anything to do with the mystery. And it's just, she was motivated by money. Who cares? Which I know is a hot take, but.
I have not watched them.
Oh, really?
But then you wouldn't have Poison Ivy.
I'm okay with that.
I have not watched them. And honestly, as much as I loved the idea of Jensen Ackles as Batman, because I love him as Red Hood, I'm going to keep it this way. I'm okay with that being a blind spot.
Oh, probably for the best, because the ending got me screaming.
Yeah. Because also, like, the great thing about, like, I don't want to go too much on a tangent about Long Halloween, because this is not a Batman podcast.
No, this is explicitly not a Batman podcast.
But the only thing I will say about this comic is the great thing about the end of the comic is that you don't know who the killer is. They make it very clear of, like, it could we're making it everybody. Everybody was the killer.
It's like the ending to Clue.
Yes. Everybody watched Clue. Clue is a great movie.
Yeah. And the comic's great too.
I didn't know there's a Clue comic, so yeah, everyone read the Clue comic.
Really?
Yeah, it's really good. It's funny.
Okay. Cool.
Okay.
Read the comic and also watch that movie. Also read All-Star Superman and watch All-Star Superman.
Yeah. So my point is like after Long Halloween, sometimes you don't want to do a 2-part movie, especially with that same kind of storytelling implemented in the original source material. Because like it works for Death and Return of, because like you have a very good cliffhanger for Death of Superman. He dies. And then Return of Superman.
I didn't want to get into that. I didn't want to like go down that rabbit hole, but I fully agree, like that, like there's a reason I think those movies actually work.
Yeah. So I do agree with like it's better off just one installment, maybe with a little bit more time, but it's fine the way it is. Like I wouldn't trade for the world.
Yeah, even if there's spots where it's like, well, it could be slightly tighter at some spots. Or I would have liked certain scenes from the comics brought in here. Like we said, Jimmy Olsen would be cool. The Bizarro stuff, I understand them cutting, but also would be cool. Like the Chronivore stuff would be cool. All of these are good things that would have been nice. And maybe the Barrel and Lilo thing is too much, but like, it's still, again, I referred to this as being like an abridged series in a positive light here. It's not comedy overlaid on it all, but we're telling a 12-part story and we're getting it into 70 minutes, and that is a hard task.
Yes.
Most times when you're talking about a 12-issue comic,
I do not envy Dwayne McDuffie in this case, and he did a phenomenal job.
Yeah, especially with a story this well regarded. Like if it was like Flashpoint, it's like do whatever the fuck you want, change anything.
Right. But like usually when we're talking about a 12-issue comic, we're talking it's going to be considered unfilmable because of just the scope of it all. And if it made it into a movie, they probably made some choices that not everyone agrees with. Watchmen.
Yeah.
But
why did you invoke that name on this show?
I mean, the Watchmen movie is fine because it's an adaptation of a great comic. It's just, it's not doing anything that's really like elevating the source material. And here I would say we do get some spots that elevate this source material. Again, the themes of when you are gifted with power, that there will be an element of that all, especially when we're talking about like the true scope of Superman's powers, like all of his senses and so forth, that will drive you to try to be better, because you're all of the things that we're afraid of, all the things that we put in front of our lives that like allow us to be selfish and cruel, like those get stripped away in this power fantasy of being Superman. So I think that thesis stands out a lot better. Again, it's a much more Luthor-centric movie that, as we kind of arrived at in this call, that I think is a cool element. It's not here's all the things about Superman all over that you should like. There is this driving narrative of like trying to do good with what you have, and that you shouldn't let other things get in the way of being the best. Like Luthor's big redemption at the end is only that he could have done more even before all that, and like that would have been a great element for him. And I think that should be the thesis that you take away from this, that like whatever gifts you have, you should try to put forward making the world a better place.
Maybe.
Don't be a dick. That's a theme of Superman. Don't be a dick.
That's a better point. Like, Spider-Man takes pictures of himself. He makes money off of it.
Well, making making a living while he's making a living while being a superhero. Like,
hey, you know what? Peter Parker is broke as hell, so like I get it. We live in a capitalist society. You got to do what you got to do sometimes.
But that is the same lesson though, because because Spider-Man first tried to just do just try to make money off of his powers initially, and that he learned was wrong. It is okay to see to yourself. Self-care is important. All the things that we talk about in society now of like trying to actually attend to yourself in a way is fine, as long as you're not toxic and destructive and you use the things that you have to make other people's lives better. You know, that should be the thesis of why we look at heroic literature, because we are trying to look for some kind of moral guidance. Like, don't be ashamed that you have to like sleep because you're tired or eat because you're hungry, but don't take someone else's food if they also are hungry.
Spread happiness and don't be a dick about it.
Yeah. I mean, that's why we look at Superman stuff. That's because we like to dream, if we were stripped away of all of our mortal failings, that we would do the best that we could.
Exactly.
So what I want to say is, hey now, you're an all-star.
Oh, no.
Get your game on.
You've been holding that in. You've been holding that in for so long. I know it. I know you have. Okay, that's it. This is the end. We've ended it.
I mean, I feel like we've been kind of circling. So, final thoughts on All-Star Superman as a property, on the movie, on the comic, whatever you want to say. Like, this is your time. Duke, you're up first.
As a comic, I'm indebted to it because it's fantastic. As on one hand, a very beautiful love letter to this guy who generally represents the best of what we can be as people. And on the other hand, a really insightful kind of dive into how messed up his life is by gaslighting the people around him so long that they can't believe his simple truths. And I genuinely appreciate it every time I read it. And it brings me to tears. And I am forever thankful that Dwayne McDuffie got to write such a well-done movie with so much love and so much reverence to this character. And such a great, unique take to how Lex Luthor is capable of, growing as a person. And it's just very well done. I'm so happy to be here. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm so glad to have you on. JD, what are your final thoughts on this?
Well, as I mentioned earlier, this is my favorite comic. This was the comic that got me on board reading Morrison and understanding what they were going for in storytelling. And Superman has slowly become my favorite character, and this comic is just a perfect synthesis of what I love about the character. Everything silly, everything great I love about this character and this world that he inhabits, and the people in his life, and the conflicts he unwittingly gets into, all of it coming together in this story about accepting death and just realizing that it is a part of life, and just wanting to leave a lasting legacy and knowing that there will be people after you to carry that on is absolutely beautiful. And Frank Quitely is a god of art, and that is a simple fact that everyone must accept. And the movie is wonderful for what they were tasked to do with Dwayne McDuffie as writer and Sam Liu as director, and the cast and the entire all the animation studios that worked on this movie. Like, the fact that they were having to simplify and streamline this vast 12-issue story into a 75-minute movie is a massive feat, and they did a very good job with what they were going to do, and I really loved the movie for that.
Well said. Jmike, your final thoughts on all of this?
I'm just going to go off of what you guys mentioned earlier, where as the book is more of like, this is the universe of Superman. The movie, like you guys said, focuses more on like Lex's redemption and his realization that, oh wait, I don't need to be a dick to everyone. I can actually help people, and that he's the one that actually comes up with the Superman formula at the end of the movie. He figures it out himself, and it's kind of cool to see it from that perspective, because Lex is almost always a dick in every comic that he's in. But it's good to like finally see him like the light pop on, and like it dawn upon him, even though it's like his last moments. But it dawns upon him. It's like, oh wait, yeah, he was right. I don't have to be this way. I can actually use my brains to help people, and that's something that you don't get to see all the time. So I do appreciate like the movie for that part.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny looking back on this one. When the comic was first announced, I was excited. I like Grant Morrison stuff, but like I've said this before, like Morrison, I think oftentimes has a lot of ideas going into small packages that I wish were decompressed a bit. You know, the opposite of a Brian Michael Bendis. And which is Bendis' own faults, and I enjoyed lots of Bendis stuff. So when this comic first came out, issue by issue, I was like, I'm enjoying this, but I don't see this as must read. And when it was finished, and then you look back at the totality of it, you're like, oh, I see why this is so good. You know, you see this bigger thing. And this movie, I think, does a really good job of distilling it into a really, you know, like I said, a very lean cut, a very like expedient way of absorbing all of the like the really big points. And sure, it's missing out on, you know, some of the floral notes that Morrison and Quitely inserted into the original, but like I said, it's still this like wonderful distillate of the pure idea that's going into it all. So I'm really glad to look back on this comic, especially after now doing this show for 4 years where we've just talked about Superman stuff and like really talked about like why we like the material, and to look at this thing that's such a celebration of Superman material, and to look then at this movie that is such a distillate of such a celebration of Superman material. And so I'm really glad that we had the chance to talk about the comic before with Alan and June, and I'm really glad that I got JD and Duke, the two of you, on this one, because before we started the episode, we realized that JD and Duke are currently tied for most number of appearances on Men of Steel, and that's just wonderful because I enjoy chatting with the both of you so much. You're just both wonderful people to enjoy comics with and to enjoy all this stuff with. And Jmike, like the fact that we've done now 101 episodes of this show together, you know, it started off as the two of us would just chat about Superman stuff when Ben and Addie would shit on Superman and prop up Batman every chance they got during certain POV recordings and Scruffy Nerf recordings. And we would just like talk like, oh, this was a cool comic, and I would loan you shit after recording Nerf Herders like on random nights. I do eventually want my copy of the greatest Superman stories ever told.
I don't know what you're talking about. What do you mean?
It's been like 4 years.
I've never heard that in my life. What? That's crazy.
Again, this is 101 episodes of a Superman podcast. We've been doing this for 4 years, celebrating the Man of Steel. I can't think of a better co-host. I can't think of better guests that we've had on. We've had so many, and you know, two of our best are right here on this call with us right now. So again, thank you all for the celebration, for all the listeners out there who have tuned in and actually heard this show, which, you know, there's some out there. Thank you all. Like, this material has been so much fun, and the chance just to like live in this mental space is like honestly one of the best parts about what has been a rough couple of years for all of us. And I'm really happy to have this conversation right now, and I'm really glad that we are going to keep on going. So, plugs. Duke, where can people find you, follow you? What have you got going on?
You can always follow me on Twitter at Prof of Evil. That's basically it right now. I'm just kind of working on my own stuff for a while. So,
all right. Well, everyone should check that out. JD, how about you?
So you can follow me on Twitter at JD_Martin I believe that's still what it is. Yeah, that's what it is. Because there's a lot of JD Martins out in the world, so that's what I had.
Apparently, you can change it. We found out eventually.
You can. Which maybe I should. I don't know anymore. I'll just continue to keep it that way because I like making things more difficult for myself. So yeah, I've got my two podcasts, Comics Quest and Fables and Reflections, here on Certain POV, on the Certain POV network. I'm really bad about making sure those episodes get uploaded, so I have episodes banked. They will be coming out very shortly. I'm hoping by the time this episode is out, there will be new episodes of those shows out. Until then, I do know that when this episode drops, there is the first episode of a new podcast that I have with the one and only Meg Griffin called Screaming in Woodsboro, where we're discussing the Scream franchise across the month of October, coming out every Monday. So before this episode drops, I believe the first episode where we talk about the first movie will be out. You can check that out wherever you get your podcasts. Don't believe we're going to have any social media for that, so just follow me on Twitter, follow Meg on Twitter, and we'll be putting that out there into the world. And also because I'm going to channel my fellow GME member Alan Kistler and say, everyone go watch the movie Barbarian. It is incredible. Zach Kreger made the craziest batshit movie of the year outside of RRR. So please go watch Barbarian. And also, since we kept talking about it, go watch Justice League Action. It's a great little show.
Oh yeah.
And also watch Batman the Brave and the Bold. This is not a Batman podcast, but watch that cartoon.
I'm not explicitly anti-Batman. I just don't want to like watch Batman. So that's fine.
And watch Disney's Hercules, because that's also good too.
It is, yeah, it is fun.
And then listen to the another past episode we just did on Disney's Hercules, where I was overridden by our guest and my co-host because they wanted no notes.
So yeah, go watch Barbarian. It's a very good movie. If you're in for a moment in a movie theater where you will audibly scream, like I did in the movie. I audibly screamed at one moment in the movie. Go have a really fucked up fun time.
Nice. And Jmike, where can people find you, follow you? What have you got going on?
Oh, well, you can find me on Twitter at Jmike101. I respond to funny jokes, memes, pictures, all that stuff. It might be kind of slow for a while because I'm only using my phone because my computer was KIA'd by Microsoft updates. So I will get back to you guys as soon as possible if I don't respond right away.
All right. Well, people should definitely check you out, even if you're a little quiet at the moment. You'll be coming back strong with your solid GIF game. And, also people should be checking out the Men of Steel pod account on Twitter. They should be checking out more episodes of this show, which you can find at certainpov.com, where there's tons of other great shows, such as Comics Quest, if you're wondering about where to get into comics. Fortunately, they're evergreen episodes, so even if there hasn't been one in a little bit, you can go check that out. And JD, I'm going to put some pressure on you to get one of those episodes out there.
You know what? You know what? I'll say this. I'll make this. The week this episode drops, I will not have only uploaded one. I will upload both episodes I have banked. I will upload them both. They're not that long, so it should not take me long to edit them. But I will say the week that this episode drops, those 2 episodes will be out. So you'll get prime content about me talking to the Autumnal and Rorschach. There you go.
Excellent. Well, people should check out those episodes as well as soon as they drop. I'm sure they will be out by the time this episode comes out. But go to certainpov.com. There's a link to our Discord server where you can come interact with us directly. You can get sneak peeks at upcoming episodes of our shows. We have a great community that we're building there. You should check out our YouTube channel, Certain POV Media, where we've got videos on Superman analogs I've been doing. We've got clips from this show, Another Pass. We've got videos from Fun and Games for the animated versions of side quests, which, Duke, you've had one that actually we did the animated one for. JD, I don't think you've been on side quests yet?
I have not, because I don't play video games.
Ah, fair enough. Well, but if you like video games, go and check that out. And again, we have animated versions of it now, so those are really cool. And do all those things, but then come back and celebrate Superman some more. We've done 101 episodes, and we've got more in the pipeline. So come back, celebrate Superman, and until then, stay super, man.
Men of Steel is a Certain POV production. Our hosts are Jmike Folsom and Case Aiken. The show is edited by Matt Storm. Our logo is by Chris Batista. Episode art is by Case Aiken. And our theme is by Jeff Moon.
So let's do a clap for Matt so that he doesn't kill us.
Okay.
Yes.
And so that we don't forget.
Hey,
so
Matt.
1, 2, 3, and then
Matt,
clap.
we love you.
Love you, man.
I love you the most.
Whoa, that's not fair.
How fucking dare you?
Make me sound great.
Okay, maybe J Mike loves you more. All right. Okay, so 1, 2, 3, and then clap, right?
All right, ready. So, I have a question. Have you ever wanted to get into comics, but you just didn't know where to start? Well, welcome to Comics Quest. I'm JD Martin, and every week I sit down with a guest to talk a comic that I think anybody can pick up and start their comics reading journey. We take a look at psychedelic sci-fi, fantastical action, heart-wrenching love stories, and of course, superheroes. So check us out at certainpov.com or wherever you listen to your podcasts.
CPOV. CertainPOV.com.